I think that's right. We all have our intrinsic fears. Actually, one of my fears is heights. I've got a real fear of heights, so we can
Yeah.
tease that out because that's quite an interesting one, you know.
I know, especially for a pilot, and I know other pilots that are afraid of heights too. So I always find that just a little ironic, but it is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm here today with my lovely friend Grady. Grady and I have known each other for about 10 years. We did our Gulfstream 650 course together in Savannah. Seriously hot month in July. We both got some experience on the 550. We made friends immediately, went out, socialized together, and just really became great friends. And we've seen each other all around the world now for nearly 10 years. So welcome, Grady.
Thank you, Ben. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Lovely to have you. It's right. Grady's got a really interesting background because he didn't actually start flying until he was 34. And you came, as you talked about, well, as I well know, we've talked plenty of times about, as you came from not a privileged family in terms of finances. So you've had to work all through your life, and you went through and did the business and finance degree, set up a t-shirt business, worked really as an entrepreneur. You didn't start flying until 34.
That is all correct, Ben. You know, being a pilot had been a childhood dream. So, you know, I wanted to do it, just didn't have the financial resources to pursue it through college, out of college. You know, I started a different company, a t-shirt company. And before that, you know, I had done various jobs. I was a DJ, a lifeguard, a bartender, just a lot of different things. And the t-shirt company provided the financial wherewithal to get my pilot's license. And I'm pretty much a goal-oriented person. So I decided, well, I know nothing about flying. I know nothing about aviation. So I'm going to stick with it until I solo. And if I don't like it, then I'll drop out then. But I actually loved it. And I went on and got my private pilot's license and then just kept moving forward. You know, like everybody else, instrument commercial, ATP, started a little aerial tour company, which I turned into a 135 charter, which led into me becoming a co-pilot on a Citation II that was based on the local field where I lived and did my flying. And that's kind of how I got into to aviation.
Yes, it's such a brilliant story. I can't actually remember. I've asked you this specifically. When you got into flying, did you do it to become a commercial pilot, or was it just literally to get to that first stage of soloing and seeing what happens after that?
There was no goal to become a commercial pilot. It was strictly to get a private pilot's license. Like I mentioned, my goal was to solo. And then once I reached that, then I wanted to get my private pilot's license. And, you know what, I did it for multiple reasons. I've always had a travel bug. I've always liked to travel, and I've always had a sense of adventure. And, you know, weekend trips, when you have a small airplane, take on a whole new meaning, because 3.5 hours in an airplane can take you a lot further than 3.5 hours in an automobile. So that's how I got into it. And then, like I said, it was my passion. So even though I was later in life, I just kept pursuing it, and you know, just brought me to where I am today.
Yeah, such a good story. The thing that I'm really impressed about, we talked about this back in 2014, because I've got that sort of basic mindset. Well, I think I'm pushing through it now about the idea, well, let's stick with the safety thing of get a job so that you've got a guaranteed income and you've got a bit of a pension and things like that. But you went against that grain. I know, being an entrepreneur, you had that mindset, and I think I'm very much developing that in my later years now. It's wonderful. It's very liberating, very empowering. But you did that early, so because you've been a contractor, haven't you? Contractor. We call it freelance over here. But you've been a freelancer for the last 14 years, and to go from, I mean, you had your first job, I think, on Citations and Falcons, but to actually go and decide that, it's just such a good story. The way you went from chief pilot on the Citations, the Falcons, to the next stage of becoming a Gulfstream pilot. I mean, I love that. It's such an empowering. Tell us that story.
Sure. Well, it's not a great story, but it's I was chief pilot for a great Part 91 flight department, and you know, the financial downturn, they got behind it. They couldn't get ahead of it, so that department closed. And I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. This was in 2009, 2010, and the aviation market wasn't great. So I was looking at everything. I was doing contract work in the Citations and the XL. And I'm going, like, if I'm going to do this, you've got to go large cabin. You got to go global or Gulfstream. And, I live near Savannah. I have friends at Gulfstream. I have other acquaintances that flew Gulfstream. So I chose to do that route. So I did. I paid for my own 550 type. my G5 type, which was a 550 to 450 of the G5. And it took me a couple years to become successful at that because, it's like any other business. When you've got to go out and you market yourself, you've got to go to the events, you've got to let everybody know who you are and what you're doing and that you're available, and you just got to meet and greet people. So it took me a couple years, but I turned into a successful G5 contract pilot. The G650 was announced, and I told a buddy of mine that I'm going to school on that. And he kind of chuckled and said, okay, yeah, sure. And when it came out, I was in one of the earlier classes with you on the 650. And, I paid for all my own training. So I had paid for my G5 initial. I paid for all my recurrence. And I bought and paid for my G650 type. And, it's a leap of faith. That's all it is. My goal was just to hopefully get enough work in it starting out to, recoup my investment and to move forward. But what I kept telling everybody is, that's just an investment in my future. And I did the exact same thing when I went to G7 school. But going back to the 650, I hit the ground running, and it's a long range aircraft. There weren't a lot of pilots typed on it. And I just hit a home run. I really did. So I became a successful G650 contract pilot. I did that for a few years. And then when Gulfstream announced the G7 series, with the side stick and the symmetry flight deck, I realized at that time that Gulfstream will never put a yoke back into another aircraft. So that is the future. And if you want to make an investment in your future, that's a plane to go to school on, because it doesn't have the range of a 650. It doesn't do the same missions, but that's going to be a start. And that's where I'm at now. I'm a full-time contract pilot on the 500, 600, and been on the G650 with you for 10 years.
You say you're such a humble individual, Grady. Honestly, this is why I love you so much, is that you're an impressive character in everything you do. But I'm still finding, after 10 years, I'm still finding all this stuff out about, which is absolutely wonderful. But for me, the big thing here is that you backed yourself. You didn't. I listened to things like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. Mm-hmm. He talks about that so many people they concentrate on what they're going to lose and what they're not going to have, rather than the joy of actually having something. They're too focused on the fear of losing something rather than the joy and the happiness and the wonder of having something in the future. But it seems to me, when I talk to you, is that you don't have that, what are you going to lose? You don't have that mindset. You have that, well, what am I going to gain from doing these things? And you're not kind of like, I'm going to be the big alpha male and do this. It's just, for you, it's just an intrinsic thing, which I obviously know met a lot of people around the world in our aviation business, as well as in life generally. Talk to my kids. You've got a lovely daughter as well, of thinking, how do we encourage people? How do we get to that stage when the dominant focus, the automatic intrinsic focus, is what are we going to gain from this situation, rather than, I'm not too sure really. So how do you think you develop that go-to I can mindset?
Ben, it's funny. And I haven't told very many people this story, but everything changed for me my senior year in high school. I was pretty much a very shy individual. I was a wallflower at the high school dance. And I've told this story to a few people. I was at a high school dance my senior year. And, I realized that if I never ask a girl to dance, I will never be rejected, but I'll also never dance. So it's a choice you have to make. And when I graduated from high school, again, I grew up in a very working class family. So I worked on a paid fire department for 2 years. So when I went to college, I had a complete different mindset. I was older than everybody else by a couple years, and I was paying for my own everything in college. So my motivation was to get really good grades, to study, but still have fun and enjoy the college experience. I see it in so many people. Everybody, we all have a fear of failure. Everybody. It's a natural thing, whether it's talking on a podcast or speaking in front of a group of people, asking an attractive person out for a date, or taking the risk and interviewing for the job of your dreams, or whatever it might be. It's a challenge to push past that fear and to actually believe enough into yourself that you can make it work. And guess what? The worst case scenario is that you won't have any regrets at the end. You can say, well, I didn't make it, but I tried. I gave it my best. And, if I was to give anybody advice, that's just believe in yourself and go for it. There's nothing holding you back, so just believe in your dreams and go for your dreams. You've got nothing to lose and everything to gain.
Yeah, that's true. And that big word is regrets. Absolutely huge word. The idea of having regrets means that you're a failure, not good enough. There's a shame-based thing for me. That's the context of that word. Thinking, as you say, never having any regrets, because you never actually lose out from your experience. You never lose out from that experience. The whole idea about failure, the reason we're Scott Wiedemeyer.
Sorry.
That's all right, mate. No worries. I think I told you earlier that I forgot to plug my laptop on the first podcast I did, and the whole thing went completely blank, even though I'd written a note.
Yeah.
To put it interesting, but we recovered it. So yeah, regrets, that whole thing. So for me, I study the brain and the the neuro system, and the limbic system is there. Of course, the basic mm-hmm. system in our brain is to survive and to procreate. So failure has to be, fear has to be an intrinsic thing to trigger us not to be eaten by a lion, or not to just jump in the sea without learning how to swim, all that kind of stuff. But we are so primed in our basic reptilian brain to think fear is something that we have to face, instead of using our prefrontal cortex, which is our personality, the unique part to us as human beings, to use that to think, actually, is the fear legitimate here? But in this particular situation, when we're standing on stage, when we are facing a difficult relationship with parents, children, friends, divorce, we've both been through divorce, people get completely emotionally hijacked because they can't put the sophisticated, rational brain in to counter the initial fear-based thing. And I honestly think that I've been caught by this on many occasions. I'll tell the story about when I was flying the 757. I did the training. The course went really well. I was confident. Came through, did my 6-monthly sim check, and I was with this ex-military guy who's a fast jet pilot, and he had that old methodology of just hammering you left, right, and center. And I couldn't get the NITS brief, which is, as we know, just for anybody that doesn't understand that, is talking to the cabin crew in the back and explaining exactly the nature of the problem and the intention of what we're going to do, how long it's going to take, or we're going to be on the ground in 10 minutes, for example, with an engine failure, and any special things. We'll prepare the cabin for an emergency landing or whatever it is, as we understand that. So, and I got the order round the wrong way, and he hammered me for 10 minutes. And I sat there completely exposed, so self-conscious, came out of that sim thinking, I never want to fly again. Why did I become a pilot? Because I felt as though I'd failed, instead of going back and thinking, that's an interesting one. I hadn't nailed that properly. And to think, right, I'm just going to nail that out. It took me, there's another story about how I overcame it, but I just felt like a failure for so long. Right. Whereas you've automatically, you think, here's an opportunity. And I'm definitely much better at that now, seeing everything as an opportunity.
Yeah. And I think part of that's maturing, age, wisdom. Like you said, we've both been through divorces. I had prostate cancer, which was a huge challenge for me in my career several years ago. I overcame all of that. And, it's hard to say. I don't want to use the old cliche, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but there is some value in that. And I think it's the same thing in aviation is, you have to know your limitations. And if you're not comfortable, with the flying into an airport, maybe with the short runway and the windy condition at night with, wet runway, then you shouldn't do it. You need to know your limitations, but at the same time, you can't be afraid to go to the edge of your limitations. Maybe not to the outer edge, but if it's safe and everything says you can do it, then you've got to have the confidence. That's the word. You got to have the confidence to just go out there and do it. And, I think it's that way in life with almost anything you want to achieve. I fly a lot of billionaires, and people always ask me, what's their common trait? And I tell everybody, they're not afraid to fail. They hate failing. They're type A's. They want to win, and they normally do win. But most importantly, they were willing to take a chance where a lot of their colleagues and maybe former students, they did not. They were afraid. So they stepped up They took a chance, and now they're billionaires because of that risk that they took, back in their earlier part of their career.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely bang on. I try and analogize it to flying, that we can prepare for the flight mission. Huge amounts of preparation goes into a flight mission. There's 1,000 people, they say, invested in the whole success of that mission, to understand how important it is to have people around us supporting us in that mission. But you get up in the air, and sometimes you just get hit by the thunderstorm. There's a story of me going over the South China Sea when suddenly out of nowhere I got hit in a 550 by a thunderstorm. The turbulence we didn't see it on the radar. It kicked the autopilot off. The nose of the airplane started to come up, and then the left wing dropped. Within split seconds, it was so violent. And then Viraj, my mate, was in the left-hand seat. We were co-captains, but he was flying on that day. Grabbed hold of the control stick, got it leveled out. So my heart was absolutely pumping, thinking, okay, this is right. Let's just get through this turbulence and we'll be okay. And then this lightning came out of nowhere, absolutely smacked straight on the end of the aeroplane. Four times it hit us dead on. And wow. All I could think about was the Air France flight that had gone down in the South Atlantic a few years before, that killed 250 odd people when they went through that thunderstorm. And I just knew my job was to look at the instruments, just to keep scanning the instruments, to know that we're in a good place. But the whole point of that story was we came out of it okay. And the other side of the story is that there was the most incredible sunrise over the Indonesian islands in the South China Sea there, and the calm and the peace and the contrast in terms of my emotions was just amazing. So I always think my mindset now, every time I'm being challenged by something, I'm always thinking, okay, Ben, you're going to get hit by the lightning strike of fear, doubt, uncertainty, exposure, but you're going to see that incredibly peaceful, harmonious, wonderful, blissful, ecstatic sunrise on the other side. And that really what helps me focus. But I think in our business, of course, we're in charge of keeping people safe and knowing when to push those limitations a little bit, whether we go into Teterboro, high intense area of traffic, the weather can just change very quickly. And it all happens. We've got all the stories for that. So again, we're two crew in that aeroplane and working out with the other person. That's another big thing. So if you were, for example, you were feeling uncomfortable, or you were with somebody else who was uncomfortable about going into Teterboro in the middle of the night and all these conditions, what would you advise them, or what would you talk about your uncertainties to the other pilot?
Well, if you're both co-captains, is the way you fly, and most operations fly, both pilots have to be on board and okay to do it. If either pilot's not comfortable with it, my opinion is don't do it. Go to Newark, go someplace, go to another airport. And we're talking about Teterboro, but that goes for anything in aviation. If one pilot, and there's two pilots in the cockpit, if one pilot's not comfortable with that situation, then you should not go into it. That's kind of the way I've lived my life. And, and I also have done some instruction flights and whatnot where they don't know what the plane is capable of. They've never done it. They've never seen it. They came out of a much smaller aircraft, that didn't have the same capabilities of a Gulfstream. And that turns more into a teaching event than anything else. Because then you can say, well, this is perfectly safe. This is fine. And I'll show you how you can do it. And that goes the same thing with parking the aircraft. We talk about Teterboro. Parking on the ramps up there can be quite challenging because they are shoehorning your aircraft in with just a few feet on each wingtip with other aircraft, because it's a very high capacity, very densely populated, airport. And if you're not, I've flown with some pilots I said, if you're not comfortable, just stop, because that's better to do that than it is to damage an airplane or, something along those lines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me of the story. It depends on your level of confidence, and you're a very confident individual. Also, you have a very strong attachment to an understanding of emotions, and getting on top of that, you don't get emotionally hijacked. And I think you're unusual in terms of men to do that. I would like to think I'm the same, and I'm really fascinated by it. You're also a very spiritually connected individual. You understand the importance of connection with everything around you, which makes you a great communicator as well. And we actually haven't, even though we're great mates and we weren't in the simulator together on the course, we've never actually been in a cockpit together. But I can imagine it would work so well between us because there wouldn't be any conflict whatsoever. There'd be okay, here's a challenge, and we're very focused. We're very solution focused rather than, well, I'm a bit underconfident. And then when you're feeling underconfident, the natural thing is to sort of react and reach out to somebody else, and not reach out to blame somebody else for not doing this. And the amount of times I've sat in that cockpit before when people are just so nervous and they start nitpicking these tiny little things. But just going back to that whole, the teaching thing of coaxing out people's confidence. So we got to work this out. I had an example a while back where we turned up at the aeroplane and the screens on the aeroplane, we've got all these main screens, haven't we? We've got six in our, in fact, five, no, sorry. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can't count it now, the G7. The G7. Quite a few of them were down, and we were going off to the Maldives. So long flight from Luton. These screens were down. The other pilot who got there is a lovely guy, but he's very risk averse and really felt uncomfortable about this. The engineer was there saying, well, we've got 3, so we're going to be good with the MEL, the minimum equipment list, which we have to refer to, as you know, just this for people who aren't aviation, that much aviation knowledge. We have to have this minimum equipment list, which we know is based around safety. So it took quite a while. I felt comfortable, so did the engineer, but he clearly didn't. And I was wrecked with that idea of, am I pushing him to something that's unsafe here, or am I trying to do this because the customers are coming, the passengers are coming, and I feel genuinely as though we're okay to do this, but we've got a 10 or 11 hour flight, thinking this guy might want to do it. So we did go in the end, but it took quite a while for him to feel confident with that. And I wasn't sure I'd put too much pressure on him just because I felt more confident in that situation. I mean, you must have found yourself in that situation before.
I think we all have. I'm blessed because I get to fly with a lot of great individuals, and again, every flight is different, Ben. I mean, and the one thing I didn't say earlier when we were talking about my career is, I had so many people, and I'm not going to name names on here. If they listen to it, they'll know who they are. But throughout my career, I've had so many people that have helped me. And that's what I try to repay the favor to. Like right now, I'm mentoring a couple up and coming, pilots. So I do try to pay it forward. But to go back to your situation is that, every situation is different. Every flight is different, not to start telling stories, but I was with another highly experienced long-term pilot friend that I've known just like you for many years. And we were down over South America near the equator. And, the thunderstorms down there are just popping up everywhere. And we've got all the bells and whistles. We've got XM weather on our iPads. We've got the radar, and we had the advantage of it still being daylight. Darkness is coming, but we still do it. And you can see these storms just coming up every place. So basically, I'm a contractor. So he goes into the back and he briefs his passengers saying, hey, we carried extra fuel. We're going to go up to 47,000 feet. And we're going to try to pick our way through these. But if we can't, we're going to turn around and go back and land. But we're going to be about 45 minutes to an hour behind schedule due to our deviations. So, and that's exactly what we did. And just like your story, we picked our way through. We had some turbulence. Thank goodness it wasn't terrible, but we had a few bumps. But then when we got through the other side, we were blessed with an amazing sunset. I actually took photos. It was so nice. And that was in a G600. So, and the outcome was great. The passengers were thankful that we didn't try to get them there on time and fly them through the worser part of the weather. They were thankful that we did do the deviations, and we did everything we could to provide them a safe, comfortable, and smooth ride. And, those are the things that I always operate under, safety's first, comfort second, and then, try to make it as economically feasible for them as possible, financially, so that's kind of the way that I normally, my brain works.
Yeah, I get that as well. I think the fact that you're mentioning the mentoring, and we are in that stage, you're in your 60s, I'm in my 50s. I've been flying for 26 years, probably similar to you, actually. I think we probably started around about the same time. Actually, we've got a 10-year split. For me now, feel as though I am in that mentoring stage, not just because of my experience in aviation, but with middle age. So if we hadn't learned something a little bit about personality, well, we've been wasting our time now. But I think, you know, the big thing is when somebody asked, I had an interview recently actually, and one of the questions for the job was, how do you see yourself now after some years of experience as a captain compared to in the early stages? And very much when I got that left-hand seat in the Gulfstreams, I felt as though I had to prove that I was good enough to be here, as opposed to having proved it already and settling into it. Understandably, you're really trying to concentrate on getting it right. So I think for me, I probably didn't listen to the other person enough. I had to prove that I, you know, could do it. And so I emotionally probably wasn't as advanced as I am now. Now I think I'm in that stage where, okay, I don't need to prove anything at all. And perhaps a little bit of complacency kicks in every now and then with it. But I just feel as though I can recover most situations. So I don't feel as though I'm proving something. I don't feel as though I have to advise anybody. I've done my coaching training, my life coaching training. One of the things, big things, the whole thing about it is don't advise. Stop trying to solve a problem here. Ask a few questions. So I've already brought that into the cockpit. And I think I do feel as though in the training, I missed that a bit. I don't think I had that sort of training from many other people. Most of the people wanted to sort of tell me what I should be doing rather than working it out for myself. And those real gold mentors, the really gold instructors, examiners, are the ones who just said, why are you doubting yourself, Ben? You can do it, right? So what's going on? Instead of shaking their head and say what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. I bring that into my children now. So it sounds as though I know very much you're in that situation. So in that, just going back to your thunderstorm situation, did the other pilot feel the same as you? Was he more nervous about it, less nervous than you?
Yeah, he was very like-minded, and we were, neither one of us was never nervous because we had a backup plan. You know, like I said, if we'd have got up there and we couldn't have safely gone through the storms of the equator, we would have just turned around and went back, 45 minutes, landed, taken on some more gas, waited on, they usually die down after dark, waited on to dissipate, and then tried again. But it worked out. It had a great ending. But that was when you were talking about your event, that one came into my head as the one, and that was only a year or two ago. It was relatively recent.
Yeah. So thinking about my simulator experience with the ex-military guy who gave me a real hammering, have you found yourself in that situation with somebody's giving you the both barrels and you think, okay, I'm not sure about this. This feels really uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, Ben. I have not in the training environment, but being a contract pilot, I fly with companies literally all over the world, and I fly with a very wide assortment of people, ex-military, ex-airline, they came up through the ranks in the corporate department. So I fly with a very, very large, dynamic of people. And, everybody's got their own personalities. I fly with a couple guys. I shouldn't say I do. I have flown with a couple guys that seem very nervous. They're constantly doing something. They just can't sit and seem to relax. I'm a relatively relaxed flyer. And I like flying with people who are like-minded. It's, we've got a mission statement. We need to get these people from point A to point B. We need to do it as safely and efficiently as possible. And, that's the mission statement. So if we can do it, we do. And if we can't, we accept that we can't for, parameters beyond our control. A maintenance issue is a perfect example. Now if it's ME-eligible and we're both comfortable to go, then yes, we go. But if it can't be MEL'd, which you've already explained the minimum equipment list, well, now the flight is canceled. We're grounded until maintenance comes and repairs the airplane, and we'll try again another day. So, that's the philosophy and the attitude that I take on it. I am not super mission oriented, meaning that we need to make this trip happen no matter what. I'm more of the mindset like, well, if everything goes as it should, we'll be able to do the mission, we'll be able to complete the trip, and everything will go just as planned. But if we get thrown some curveballs that we can't overcome for reasons beyond our control, then we'll cancel the flight and repair the airplane or wait till the weather improves, and then we'll try again another day. So that's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I've been in plenty of situations before with people who aren't quite so confident, and they, again, going back to that idea that they want to stay in the safety of keeping the job, and sometimes
Right.
that limits their ability to make those clear decisions. And I'm not saying that I haven't been guilty of that in the past. I'm sure there's plenty of times I have, of thinking, well, we've got a billionaire in the back of the aeroplane and we've got to get there. There's pressure is on. And we find in our business, I've flown in the airlines where it's just standard. If the airplane's not good, you tick it off and away you go. And 250 passengers in the back. It's like, I'm terribly sorry, everybody, but that's the way it is. But we've got the added pressure of these billionaires potentially screaming down threats. I've been in the back of an airplane in Kazakhstan with a billionaire screaming at me, absolutely screaming at me. And for me, I just detached myself from that situation. But a lot of people would be geared towards thinking, we've got to get this done. We've got to get this done. And it distorts their decision making of actually, these are the risks. These are the options. Let's just say no to these people in the back. You know, I definitely wasn't in that confident position earlier on in my days, but being shouted at a few times, you think actually about me. And I think this is where we develop this emotional thing of thinking, when you make that decision to shut the aeroplane back and come back the next morning, somebody got to go and speak to them in the background. You got to speak to the operations people, and they are so mission orientated. The money's got to come in. They're worried about losing the customer. So you've got to do it. You've got to do it. And being able to say no sometimes can be a very hard decision. But I think that's where we have to understand that emotional understanding of what's going on inside us, so that we build the confidence to actually say to the other person, I'm sorry, we can't do this. And know that they're screaming and shouting at you is actually not about you. It's about them.
Of course. And I've told many up and coming pilots that no is the hardest word you will ever utter to an owner, because, they're billionaires. They've got a very important meeting they've got to get to. If they don't make it, it might cost them millions of dollars, and there's a lot of pressure on you. But they didn't hire you to be a yes man, because they've hired you to keep them safe. And you have to detach yourself from the emotion. I've seen passengers get very upset. Being a contractor, I've never actually been yelled at like you were discussing, but I've had passengers get very upset. And, I sympathize with them. I understand why they're upset. I really do. And I wish there was something we could do about it. But when the weather is so bad that you just can't go, or you've got a maintenance issue that keeps you on the ground, that is just something that's beyond your control. And you just have to stand up and say, I am so sorry, but we cannot go. The answer is no. And that's the hardest word that I think a lot of pilots have to ever utter to their passengers, to the principal, or to the crew. Somebody has to make a decision, and it's the PIC, which is normally, one of the full-time guys.
I think that therein lies a good point, isn't it? Is that you come in as a contractor, you're highly valuable, and there are plenty of times when your experience is far greater than those people, and perhaps your confidence, as you've mentioned before, can be far greater, yet the other person has to make that decision. And I can see for you, it's a difficult thing. You're in a very claustrophobic environment. Sometimes we end up at the aeroplane at 4 a.m. We haven't slept for the night before. It's snowing, the fuel's late, the catering's late. One of the other crew members is, well, you're not feeling particularly well. There's so many dynamics that can knock you in terms of confidence and communication skills and things like that. But you have that turning up of thinking, actually, I'm not familiar with the people that I'm flying with. I'm not familiar with the operational processes, the standard operating procedures that we in an airplane. You've got to come in there and you've got to work out the dynamic with the passengers as well. That's quite a lot that you deal with. So you have to assess that situation very quickly and think, how do I be the flexible Grady and not the fixed mind? I'm the experienced one. I'm here, but it's unique, which I can see. It takes a certain type of personality like you to be asked back time and time again after 14, 15 years as a contractor, because I think you have that high level of emotional understanding of being able to adapt to the personalities involved.
Yeah, and Ben, thank you for saying that. And it's that, and my my mission statement for me when I show up to a company is I am there to support the crew, to support that operation, to support that mission. Me flying the airplane, that's secondary. And I'm also there to get paid, as a contractor. So that's what I do. I'm just there to support the team. And I can tell you that I've flown with some outstanding pilots, and I've never flown with anyone that I was concerned about. And we have had some challenging situations, but I just passed 10,000 hours of total time, and 3/4 of that's in jets and Gulfstreams this past summer. So I have a lot of experience, and so much of the decision making comes from experience. So I have had full-time, being a contractor, I've had full-time people say, well, what do you think? Because they've only been flying the airplane for maybe 6 months or a year. And they're relatively new to Gulfstreams, and maybe they're even new to large cabin international operations. And I always tell them the same thing. We break it down, we discuss it, and I say, I personally feel this operation is safe, but you are the PIC, you're the captain. So if you're not comfortable with it, do not feel obligated to do it. And, that's come up a few times. And a lot of times it is a joint decision. They'll ask me, well, I'm okay with it. Are you okay with it? And if I am, which is most of the time, I'll say, yeah, I'm absolutely fine with this decision. Let's continue. So, I've just been blessed because I fly with a lot of good crews. And I think that also comes when you're flying the Gulfstreams or maybe the Globals, if you're a top tier operator, which is what Globals and Gulfstreams really are, and Falcons for that matter. But, flying the 650, flying the 500, 600, that's the pinnacle to me. And you're dealing with, top rated crews. These guys didn't get to where they are by making bad decisions or by being difficult or being yes men for that matter. And so many of the companies, I work for a lot of Fortune 50 companies, and, they have SOPs, they have policies. And if something is outside of a risk factor, then they have to take it to somebody above them, usually the chief pilot, possibly the director, and say, hey, our score came in relatively high. We need to mitigate the risk. This is my thoughts. Are you okay with us doing this trip? So and you mentioned it once before, there are so many people involved to a successful flight. I mean, I don't know what the number would be, but it's hundreds, if not maybe up to even 1,000 by the time it's all said and done. It's schedulers, it's dispatchers, it's flight attendants, which don't get near enough credit. It's the pilots, it's the ground maintenance staff, it's ATC, it is the people, whomever's filing your flight plans and getting your overflight permits and your slot times. It takes a mountain of people to make a trip successful. And it's everybody working together. It's teamwork. That's truly what it is. It's just teamwork. That's how you accomplish these very, very difficult trips. And just in the last 6 or 8 months, I've done a couple that were very difficult. But, they had a top-notch crew. They had a top-notch scheduling, dispatch, maintenance, flight attendant. And, we were able to accomplish exactly what they wanted to accomplish. And again, it just comes back to teamwork and everybody working together, no big egos, no agendas, personal agendas that they feel like, ooh, I've got this big ego and I've got to make this happen and prove something to X, Y, Z. They just accept it as it is, the facts, and we work as a team and we make a decision and it works.
I think absolutely bang on. If I could write that as a mission statement for myself, that would be exactly it, word for word. It's brilliant. What I'm thinking there is the huge leadership is talked about a lot now. It's such a big word. And the idea about leadership is that you're right at the top of the tree. Okay. And of course, we know an organization or a team or whatever. I played a lot of sports myself, worked for a lot of companies. If the atmosphere is set from the top, that is creative and innovative and go for it, mate. I believe in what you've got to do. If you've got a problem, give us a shout. Otherwise, it's your way and go for it. But leadership comes from every angle. So we talked about the various people who are invested in our business. I think about the fueler.
Right.
As far as I'm concerned, very much a leader for us, because if we didn't empower him to be absolutely bang on, knowing his task and advising us if he looks around and notices we've got a nick in the wing of the aeroplane or we've got a flag in the wrong place, we need him to say, hey guys. So we can't be top down. Leadership starts from every single level in there, but that comes from confidence to be able to say, actually, yeah, I'm not sure, I'm uncertain, but I'm going to voice my opinion in this situation. And I think what you're saying from being the contractor is learning to read that situation and empowering the other people to feel or to operate at their highest level, which is basically what leadership is about, isn't it? Really, it's
Yes.
giving that other person confidence. Eleanor Roosevelt said that great quote. I don't know if you've ever heard it, that good leaders will empower somebody to believe in the leader. Great leaders will empower somebody to believe in themselves. I think that's a good way of describing leadership, because you don't need to be the big CEO, the billionaire, or the chief pilot, or the DFO, the director of flight operations. Anybody that has the ability to encourage others to feel good about themselves are absolute leaders. And I think that I would put that, probably if I'm summing Grady up, that you are such a good leader because you understand how to make people feel great about themselves. That comes from emotional understanding. That comes from the what I term as the spiritual understanding, i.e. connecting to something much bigger than just ourselves. So yeah, I think for me, that's what I'm thinking. Grady is a great leader. You're a great leader.
Wow. I appreciate that, Ben. Like I've said many times, I try to support everybody. And again, the support doesn't just end with the other pilot or even the flight attendant. It goes down to the maintenance guy, to the line crew, to the fueler, to the person delivering the catering. I mean, again, there's so many people involved in making a successful flight that and I think it's probably that way in life if you really look at it. I mean, like I always say, no man's an island. And as I said earlier, throughout my aviation career, throughout my life, my personal life, some of my greatest challenges that I personally have faced, there's always been people there to help and to support me. And if I do fall down, they'll pick me up, brush me off, and push me back into the game. And that is what I try to do for other people at this point, because you mentioned it earlier, and I was joking with an acquaintance of mine 6-8 months ago. We went from being the new guys on the field to being the old guys overnight. I must have napped during that transition. I didn't get the handoff. I don't know how I went from being the new young guy to the old guy, but that's where we're at now in our career. And I think there is a responsibility for us with our experience and our age and our wisdom to try to help, the up and coming generation of pilots, male, female, regardless of, to help them, because people helped us. People helped me when I was coming up. I had a couple of really good mentors, earlier in my career that gave me great advice and probably kept me from endangering myself or doing something stupid that I would regret later. And I'll tell you, one of them is, he goes like, if you're thinking about doing something you're not sure and it goes bad, read that NTSB report backwards and say, and if you think your peers would go, what was Grady thinking? Don't do it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's very good.
That's kind of the way I live my life.
Think of the accident report and then work back to the beginning from there. I think that's brilliant advice. Listen, we could talk about this for hours, and we do when we get together. And I really would love you to come on the podcast many more times, because there's so many good stories that we'll talk about. But it's been brilliant, mate. It's been brilliant. Thank you for supporting me and our community and just really supporting humanity. I think it's been absolutely wonderful.